Son, if this was your daughter, wouldn't you want desperately to get to the truth?
For weeks, everything in this case has depended on somebody's memory or somebody's word. What a friend recalled hearing. What a judge said happened. What an attorney was told by a witness. All of it fallible, even among people with nothing to hide. This week, for the first time, something arrived that doesn't depend on anyone's honesty at all. A time-stamped GPS record of exactly where a boat went, minute by minute, on the day Nolan Wells disappeared. In the same week, his parents sat down directly with the Jackson County District Attorney and announced they're now running a private investigation alongside the official one. Two very different kinds of update, arriving at once. One is hard and mechanical. The other is about pressure, process, and a family that has decided not to wait quietly. Let's walk through both, and then talk honestly about what the GPS data actually changes. CBS News obtained GPS data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, tracking the boat that carried Nolan to Horn Island on July 4th. According to that data, the boat left its dock at approximately 9:56 that morning and arrived at Horn Island at 11:14. That's the baseline, an ordinary start to what should have been an ordinary holiday. The data shows the boat left Horn Island at 4:31 that afternoon and returned to its original dock. That timestamp is worth pausing on, because it lines up closely with what's already been said publicly. Judge Ashley Cole has stated the group left the island around 4:30 because the boat was taking on water, a bilge pump issue. The GPS data now gives that specific claim something it didn't have before, an independent technical timestamp that roughly matches her account. That's real corroboration on one specific point. Let me be very clear about what it doesn't do. It doesn't resolve why Nolan wasn't on that boat when it left. Judge Cole's statement bundled several claims together: the departure time, the bilge pump explanation, and Nolan's stated decision to stay behind. The GPS data only speaks to one of those, the timing of the boat's movement. It says nothing about whether the pump genuinely malfunctioned, or what was actually said between Nolan and the friends who left without him. A partially corroborated account is not a fully corroborated one, and that distinction matters as this case moves forward. Here's where the data gets genuinely interesting, and where it introduces a detail nobody has addressed in any account so far. After returning to the dock, the boat didn't stay there for the night. It left again, traveling into Fort Bayou at 5:52 that evening. It returned to the dock at 6:06, a 14-minute round trip. Then, at 7:19 that same evening, it went to the Fort Bayou boat launch, where it appears to have been towed overland to the boat owner's residence in Biloxi. Sit with that sequence. The boat arrives home around 4:30. Roughly 90 minutes later, it goes back out for a quick trip into Fort Bayou. About an hour after that, it makes a third movement to a launch point before finally being trailered home for the night. Nobody, not Judge Cole's statement, not Elmore's account of the missing car keys, not Javon Williams, not Trace Estep, has mentioned this second trip. It's a documented, time-stamped movement of that boat that, as of this reporting, has no public explanation attached to it at all. There are entirely innocent explanations available. Boats need fuel. Equipment gets forgotten. A genuine bilge pump problem might have required a short trip to check repairs, or to move the vessel somewhere it could be worked on before being trailered home. Fort Bayou is a real, ordinary waterway in the area, not some remote destination. A short trip there isn't inherently suspicious on its own, but an innocent explanation isn't a confirmed one. And in a case already defined by unexplained gaps, a missing phone, deleted messages, a 13-hour delay before a formal search began, a fresh, unaddressed gap in the boat's own movements is exactly the kind of detail that deserves a direct explanation from whoever was actually aboard. Was it the owner alone? Was anyone else there? Did it have anything to do with Nolan? Or was it a completely separate errand that happened to occur the same evening he was still missing? Right now, nobody outside a small circle actually knows, and the public record doesn't offer an answer. The Marine Resources report does identify specific people connected to the case at this early stage. It states the boat's owner, his mother, and one other individual reportedly with Nolan that day have all cooperated with the investigation. This is worth noting carefully. It's the first official document, not a second-hand claim or a leaked message, to confirm that an adult, specifically the boat's owner, is connected to this case in some formal capacity. That lines up, at least partially, with Elmore's earlier public claim that an adult was present on the boat, a claim we've previously noted hadn't been independently confirmed. This report doesn't fully confirm Elmore's account either, but it moves adult involvement from a family member's assertion into the official record. And the mention of the owner's mother cooperating raises its own question. What did she know, or need to explain, that made her part of this early cooperation too? Now, why does this kind of data matter differently than everything that's come before it? GPS data doesn't rely on anyone's memory or willingness to come forward. It's a mechanical record, generated automatically, independent of what anyone later chooses to say. That doesn't make it perfect evidence. It tells you where a vessel was, not who was on it or why any trip occurred. But it gives investigators, and now the public, a fixed, objective skeleton that every witness account can finally be measured against. If somebody's story doesn't match the data, that's no longer one person's word against another's. It's a documented fact that any account either fits or doesn't. It's worth being honest about the limits, too. This data confirms movement, not intent, conversation, or condition. We don't know who was on the boat during that second trip, or why it happened, or whether it has anything to do with Nolan at all. We also don't know whether investigators have already resolved this privately and simply haven't said so publicly. The Marine Resources report notably ends on July 5th, the point where Jackson County Sheriff's Office formally took over as lead agency. So whatever follow-up happened after that handoff isn't captured in what CBS obtained. And there's a broader limitation worth naming plainly. GPS tracking on a recreational vessel typically records the boat's location, not the identities of everyone aboard. Unless someone specifically documented who was on it during each leg, the data alone can't tell us whether the same people were present the whole time. It still has to be paired with actual testimony to become a complete picture. Now, the second major thread this week. For the first time since Nolan's body was recovered, Christine and Elmore sat down directly with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Mears-Mrath and her team. Ben Crump, alongside attorneys Lisa Park, Eric Hertz, Justin Preston, and Cliff Jones, described the meeting as respectful. The central piece of news. Mrath told the family that once the sheriff's department finishes its investigation, this case will be turned over to a grand jury. Let me be precise about what that means. A grand jury referral is standard procedure in Jackson County for unnatural or suspicious deaths. It is not, by itself, confirmation that criminal charges are coming. Mrath has said as much herself, telling NBC News that authorities haven't indicated this is being treated as a criminal investigation at this stage, that she doesn't want to rush to judgment, while stressing the case is a priority for her office. Crump described the meeting as candid on both sides. He said he pressed her to have both her office and the sheriff's department investigate this zealously, and that Christine and Elmore shared their own lived experience directly with the DA, specifically around how, in their view, people in the South are sometimes investigated differently, depending on who they are. He framed that as an attempt at mutual understanding, not a demand that the DA simply accept it. Alongside the official process, the family has built out a substantial private investigation of their own. Attorney Eric Hertz is leading that effort, working with a team that includes former law enforcement and federal agents. He said calls have been coming in somewhere between 50 and 100 a day, from people who were on Horn Island themselves, or know people who were. Some of those callers, he said, are not talking to local law enforcement at all. His team's goal is to get them to cooperate with investigators directly, rather than simply funneling information to the family's side alone. This dual-track approach, an official investigation running alongside a well-resourced private one, is unusual in cases with an attorney of Crump's reach. In theory, the value is redundancy. A separate credentialed channel increases the odds information gets captured instead of lost. The risk, which Crump has acknowledged, is that two tracks can produce two conflicting sets of information that need reconciling before any of it is useful in front of a grand jury. One concrete outcome of the DA meeting involves Nolan's phone directly. Both sides agreed to a joint, simultaneous inspection, the family's own experts and the DA's team examining the device together, at the same time, so everyone sees exactly what's on it at once rather than through separate examinations. This directly addresses a concern flagged earlier in this case, that the family's team had looked at the phone before it formally reached investigators. A joint inspection closes that gap. It matters practically because when a piece of digital evidence has already been examined separately by two parties before either side agrees on shared access, disputes tend to follow almost automatically, over chain of custody, over whether anything was altered, over whose forensic findings should be trusted. A joint, simultaneous inspection sidesteps nearly all of that. Now, a moment from this press conference that deserves real attention. A reporter asked Crump directly about his earlier statement that Nolan could be heard on the viral video, saying something close to, "Give me my freaking phone. What are you freaking doing?" His answer this time was noticeably more careful. He said that's what a witness told his team, and that's what they reported at the time. Since then, another witness, Trace Estep, has come forward saying that voice on the recording is actually his own, not Nolan's. Crump said his team now has audio experts working to determine whose voice it actually is, and that as of this press conference, it remains unresolved. Going forward, he said, his team will be more careful to specify when a claim comes from what a witness told them rather than presenting it as confirmed. This walk back deserves real attention, given how central that claim was to the emotional weight of this case for weeks. It was repeated at press conferences, cited by commentators, treated by a large share of the public as effectively settled. Hearing Crump himself now describe it as unresolved and contradicted by a named witness doesn't mean nothing happened on that video. But it does mean the specific claim that anchored so much public suspicion may not hold up the way it was originally presented, and that's a correction worth carrying forward in how the rest of this case gets discussed. Attorney Eric Hurds raised something procedural but significant under Mississippi law. Crime victims are entitled to an incident report within 72 hours. That window had already passed by the time of this meeting, and the family still hadn't received it. Part of the point of sitting down with the DA was to start actually obtaining that report, along with other basic information the family should already have had. Asked directly whether they'd gotten it by the end of the meeting, the answer was simply, not yet. Christine addressed the state of communication with law enforcement directly, and it wasn't encouraging. The DA's office has decided to take over primary communication with the family going forward, in part because they have a dedicated victim advocate on staff. Christine appreciated that shift, but was honest about how things had been before it. The last time anyone from the sheriff's department had actually communicated with her, she said, was the previous Tuesday, and even that was only in response to a text message she herself had sent, asking for an update. More than a week into an active investigation into her own son's death, that was the extent of direct contact from the lead agency. In a case that has drawn national civil rights figures, members of Congress, celebrity funding, and sustained media coverage, the actual line of communication between the grieving parents and the agency responsible for finding out what happened to their son had, by Christine's own account, gone essentially quiet. Crump also used part of this press conference to address misinformation directly. Asked about a viral pool party photo his team had shared online, he said reposting isn't the same as authenticating, that his team labels reposts as reposts and shares content specifically to generate tips, not to assert facts. He acknowledged the sheriff's department is fielding hundreds of its own calls, and said he hopes that when this reaches a grand jury, every relevant witness and piece of evidence gets presented fairly. He also spoke with visible frustration about the human cost of all this. Friends connected to this story have received death threats. AI-generated videos have targeted Christine directly, fabricated content attacking a mother who is simultaneously grieving her son and preparing to bury him. He called it god-awful and said nobody's life should be threatened in pursuit of the truth. The same week brought the details everyone had been waiting on with real dread. The service will be held Monday, July 20th, at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs. Visitation from 9 to 11 that morning, the funeral following. Christine was direct about the tone she wants. "We want to celebrate Nolan," she said. "He would not want us sitting around crying." A repass, framed as a celebration, is planned afterward at the Jackson County Fairgrounds, open to media, with Nolan's football coaches and former teammates from middle school, high school, and college specifically included. Christine closed with a personal request that if anyone plans to protest, including on the day of the funeral itself, it remain peaceful, saying Nolan was never that kind of person. There's something worth noting in how deliberately this family has chosen visibility over privacy, even at the one moment most families would want it most. Christine publicly thanked those who've carried them through the past 2 weeks. Tyler Perry is covering the funeral costs. Colin Kaepernick funded the independent autopsy. Reverend Al Sharpton has agreed to officiate. Perry has spoken about his own reasons, a nephew who died in a Louisiana prison under circumstances he still questions, and separately helping another mother seek answers about her own son in Florida. He called the agony of not having answers debilitating, which reframes his involvement as something more personal than a celebrity simply attaching his name to a cause. Two of Nolan's football coaches shared their own memories this week, and the portrait matched everything his family has said publicly. Wide receivers coach Irvin Moore remembered Nolan's recruiting visit and how he made sure his younger brother got his share in the moment, trying on the team uniform. Head coach Les George, 42, described him simply, a genuine person, the kind who wants to see the good in everyone. George remembered Nolan getting no playing time in the season opener and still celebrating that win as enthusiastically as anyone on the roster, and said he never seemed to have a bad day regardless of what he was dealing with personally. So, stepping back, what does the GPS data actually add to a case built almost entirely on competing memories? First, a verified anchor point. The 431 departure now has independent confirmation separate from any single witness. Second, and more importantly, a completely new unexplained thread, that second and third trip out to Fort Bayou and the boat launch, something no existing account has addressed. Third, it formally connects an adult, the boat's owner, to the case's official record independent of Elmore's earlier claim. Fourth, it changes the burden of explanation. Before this report surfaced, any question about the boat's movements that evening could be met with a shrug or a claim of not remembering. Now there's a specific, time-stamped set of movements that whoever was involved will eventually need to account for, to investigators, to a grand jury, or to the public record. What it doesn't do is answer the central mystery. It doesn't tell us what happened to Nolan between 3 o'clock that afternoon and the moment he ended up in the water. It doesn't confirm or deny anything about the video, the deleted messages, or the disputed conversation on the beach. What it gives this case is its first genuinely hard, unimpeachable data point, and a brand new thread that deserves real follow-up. Nolan Wells was 18, a football player his coaches describe as someone who made everyone around him feel accepted, a son whose parents are now doing something almost unimaginable, planning his funeral and pursuing his investigation at the same time, refusing to let either one wait for the other. This case is not closed. When that unexplained Fort Bayou trip gets addressed, when the joint phone examination moves forward, when both autopsy results finally arrive, we will be here to cover it. If this is the kind of reporting you want, sourced, verified, nothing added for shock value, subscribe. We'll bring you the facts as we actually get them, and not a moment before.